MTV's Spider-Man falls into this weird category of Spider-Man shows in which it's not necessarily forgotten, but at the same time, it's not exactly something that people bring up a whole lot of, right? When we talk about forgotten Spider-Man shows, we're more talking like Spider-Man Unlimited, stuff like that, like the 80s Spider-Man cartoon in between the 60s and 90s. We think of those as a little bit more forgotten Spider-Man shows. MTV is known about, yes, but it's not exactly popular, so it sits in this weird middle ground. And while I was finally going back and watching it again after promising a sequel to the Electro video that I posted over a year ago, I came to find out that, man, MTV Spider-Man was dark. And I don't think that's exactly a statement that will surprise many people. It was designed to be a more adult and far more impactful Spider-Man show. It was for an older audience, so it's not surprising that it's so dark. Another interesting tidbit about the show is that it's oddly connected to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man shows of the time, specifically the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. And that connection also hurt the show, not as much as it helped it necessarily. When it comes to being locked into a pre-existing canon that the show barely followed on its own, even if I think it helped work like stylistically with how the show looked, especially being early 3D CG, which I think actually holds up pretty well, especially relative to like Iron Man Armored Adventures, which I don't think has held up just as well. But either way, I thought this show was fairly interesting, and especially how much more adult it felt, considering this is the only Spider-Man cartoon that we have that has made a true effort to be more adult. It's kind of crazy to think about. And all this while Neil Patrick Harris voices Spider-Man, and oddly enough, he really does it for me. I can't believe I just said that. His voice is really well done when it comes to being Spider-Man. I can very much hear him being an older college-age Spider-Man. But I didn't exactly come here to drone on about how much I might like Neil Patrick Harris as Spider-Man. No, I want to talk about this show and its oddly really dark episodes. Now again, this show got to be more adult. Spider-Man got to be the usual man whore that he is with the ladies. Harry was seen drinking like every single episode. This show was 100% more aimed at adults. But some of these episodes got really dark, and they tackled some subject matters that I feel like were not only real in some sense, but also just wacky, fantastical, and comic book goodness for Spider-Man. I really liked this show, even if it only had a short 13 episode run, and I wanted to give it one more once over, especially since I just finished covering Spectacular Spider-Man, and I can't help but watch tons of Spider-Man content. Getting into the episodes though, specifically the ones that stick out to me the most was the two-part finale and Electro's 2 appearances in the show. Now, I've already covered Max Dillon's original appearance that I did already make a video on over a year ago as referenced earlier, but seeing as that was before my Captain America Earth's Mightiest Heroes video and a majority of you all came to find this channel, I should probably give a quick little recap on Max Dillon and why his episode was so sad. You see, Max was this horrifically bullied college student that oddly enough engaged with the hazing, believing it would be a way for him to get in good with the college jocks. That's all he wanted at the end of the day, was acceptance by his peers and a driving need to be enjoyed by them, essentially. And ultimately that led to him almost dying and being consumed in concrete while in a car. And even worse, when he showed up to a party he was invited to by a girl that he liked, and also was believing that in this party he would be anointed into the fraternity that he wanted to join, he was instead paintballed. And, well, that's not exactly too cool. And then Max, after dealing with all of this bullying and hatred, went up to a sign, electricity strikes, and the next thing you know, he's got superpowers. And the first thing that he does with this superpower is literally try to kill the people who perpetrated this bullying against him. Which, I mean, like, yeah, I'm not surprised he would try to do that, but, you know, punishment fitting the crime and all. Either way, that episode was pretty dark and pretty serious, reminded me a lot of Static Shock's school shooting episode, and dealt with a lot of ideas when it came to bullying and the need to, better take care of it in society, and how hazing, even at a college level, can lead to people crashing out in ways that are dangerous and harmful to even those who weren't involved, as a lot of people at that party either got scared to half to death or put themselves in serious danger despite not actually participating in hurting Max Dillon. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, because I really want to talk about the second time he comes around. You see, after the first appearance, Max has perceivably gone away and hopefully has found his peace. But unfortunately, he hasn't, because Max Dillon's living energy now, and he can kind of just bounce around as he wants. Shout out the Living Laser. If you know, you know. Max instead decides to take this time to torment the poor girl that he was super into, but she didn't exactly show interest back. And instead, he pretty much spends the entire episode tormenting her. Now, mind you, she was pretty nice to Max throughout the episode. She might not have wanted to date him, but she wasn't mean to him even in the slightest. As a matter of fact, Max and his unruly powers ended up hurting her more than she ever did anything to him. And him deciding to stalk her and be really, really creepy throughout the episode, especially in the visuals, I feel like they got real creative with that. Max ultimately ends up becoming the very thing that he was so upset about. He becomes that weird bully that he hated so much because he's quite literally stalking and harassing this poor girl despite what he went through. Now, you could definitely make a case for the fact that being living energy probably does something not so great to your mind, but man, Max takes it to a whole nother level. And he also looks visually like gaunt, as though he's a skeleton in this episode, and it's really, really freaky. Like the whole episode, Max is like high-key giving incel vibes throughout all of it. He is overly obsessed with this woman that has nothing that wants to do with him. He very much has no care for whether or not she wanted him in the first place, and he seeks to torment her for rejecting him. It's giving incel, and it's extremely sad because we all know Max didn't start out this way, but this is ultimately where he ended up. And even Spider-Man kind of points it out at him, but doesn't use the word incel because this is like the very early 2000s.
Sally's really stoked. Yeah, she loves hooking up with amped up homicidal maniacs. Stay away from Sally! Yeah.
I think part of what made this all so compelling for me, though, is the idea that the show never presents issues like this as being black and white or just good and evil, as though you only have one or two binary choices. And I think that comes with the ability to have a more adult show, is that you can have those gray areas and those nuances. Yes, Max Dillon is a piece of shit. I think that's pretty clear, but he didn't start that way. He is a product of his environment and his situation, which is something the show tends to highlight, and something even Spider-Man himself highlights at the end of the episode, which is something that I really enjoyed seeing. Max is a product of searching for validation from his peers in the wrong places in just about every single scenario, whether it's with girls, whether it's with fraternities, or whether or not it's with becoming a literal electricity god and using those powers to terrorize some random girl because she wouldn't be with you, and genuinely hurt her because she perceivedly hurt you. Again, all of these things are not painted in one stroke of black and white, but rather in lots of morally gray areas. And I think that's genuinely what makes this show so good, and why I wish it was, more than one 13 episode season, which felt really sucky. Also, again, Neil Patrick Harris really does it for me as Spider-Man. I don't mean it that way.
The fact is, things aren't usually black or white. Electro was just looking for respect and companionship. Not in the good way, that's for sure. But he wasn't as evil as people might have thought.
And well, these two episodes were very much dark in the sense of body horror and how creepy Max Dillon looked, the strange moans he would make, in the society type of attitude that was presented in these episodes. The finale of this show was scary and extremely dark because of the subject matter and the nature of mind control. When I was growing up, I always thought mind control was this really cool power, telepaths were really dope, And as I got older, I started to realize like how horrifying having a telepath anywhere near you would be. They know what you're thinking at all times. They might oust your sexuality without your permission, Jean Grey. Or, you know, they might do some other things such as making you live your worst fears possible, all because you might have, I don't know, upset them. Either way, these two episodes really presented to me how scary telepaths could be. And another thing that I really like, I've always had this idea that, especially for finales and for big villains, it shouldn't just be about the physical when it comes to fighting a hero, but it should also be a lot more about the mental when it comes to trying to defeat a hero. Especially a character like Spider-Man. Attacking his mental is really where it's at. And so we get a finale with two psychic twins. Psychic's not the right word, more like telepathic twins. And the entire first episode takes place in Spider-Man's head, pretty much. With the twins creating this sort of fantasy world in which Spider-Man not only is able to beat them, but he is also able to start living low-key his best life. As a matter of fact, the rest of this episode goes like unnervingly well when it comes to not only Spider-Man's love life, but Peter's life in general in this show. Something that I haven't really mentioned is that this show does a really good job of showing Peter has a shitty life that has a lot of lows, but it has some highs. This show's version of MJ is as though Sam Raimi actually took the time to flesh out Mary Jane and to make her an actual character, rather than just having her scream majority of the movies and be a horrible person and help to ruin the perspective of MJ going forward in the future. That's not the point of this video. Either way, Peter's having a pretty decent life, and the twins are making it so he does. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this episode specifically is the first time that you watch it, you start to get the notion that something isn't right, but you're not entirely sure what it is. And I love the idea that they allude to it, especially through the visuals of the show. I really enjoy how it looks when Peter is starting to shake off the mind control and they bring it back into full fruition.
There's no 2-for-1 special. There's no, that's double dipping, Peter. That's double dipping.
But back on the track of Spider-Man having a pretty decent life for himself, once again, this fantasy world that he lives in still gives him villains to fight. It still gives him relationship drama, but not nearly to the degree that would make him upset. As a matter of fact, Peter himself ends up having one of his, best reveals, in my opinion, in media to Mary Jane that he is Spider-Man through this episode. They do it in a really sweet and caring way, but ultimately, in the process of him revealing his identity, the twins prey on Spider-Man's greatest fear. The idea that him being Spider-Man is going to negatively and adversely affect not only his friends' lives, but the lives of the people that are closest to him. So the twins, using their mind control, they key out the fact that Nikki's not the girl he likes. Oh yeah, Nikki, haven't mentioned her. Nikki is actually this news anchor that Peter low-key uses for a lot of information as Spider-Man and kind of dates. And Mary Jane is obviously super into Spider-Man, not necessarily that much into Peter. It's kind of tossed up in the air. Had a relationship with Harry, again, following Sam Raimi's continuity. But ultimately, they know which woman that he loves the most. That's Mary Jane. And they ultimately choose to have Kraven kill Mary Jane because the twins want Spider-Man to get rid of Kraven. And ultimately what this leads to is a funeral for MJ. And when I first watched this, I genuinely believed that MJ was dead. And what we end up getting out of this as well is potentially one of the greatest cameos from Stan Lee ever. It's my personal favorite Stan Lee cameo. He comes in and he starts convincing Spider-Man of all people to go out for revenge. That's not really surprising though. Anytime anybody spins the block on MJ or, God forbid, Aunt May.
Isn't that what you really want? To avenge MJ's death?
Who are you?
How does it feel every time you picture her in your arms, dying, and Kraven just running off?
Now, Peter, obviously not in his right mind and believing that he lost the woman that he genuinely loves the most, ain't exactly ready to hear all that peace talk, and so instead he follows what Stan Lee's character in this episode is giving him to follow, the idea of revenge. It's really pulling on like the death of Kraven's story, in my opinion, when it comes to how Spider-Man wants to go after his revenge. And I find it very, very interesting how they portrayed this first episode, because on a first watch through, you don't really know that Spider-Man's being mind controlled until the end of the episode, unless, you know, you're pretty smart and can pick up the clues. Sometimes they feel a little too obvious, but either way, this gives a really great first viewing experience, and also an extremely scary viewing experience that somebody as mentally strong as Spider-Man can't even resist these two twins and their weirdly incestual relationship from mind controlling him and getting him so convinced that Kraven is the enemy that he's going to kill Kraven on sight without any sense of duty, any sense of responsibility, essentially erasing all of the lessons Uncle Ben taught him and reverting Spider-Man back to what he was when he went after the mugger the very first time. Now again, we know Spider-Man has a tendency of being on 10 when it comes to Mary Jane or especially Aunt May, so it's not really surprising that he would be so willing to do this for Mary Jane and spin the block on Kraven pretty much. Peter himself, though, isn't nearly as like scary in the show as some others, but man, when we got to this episode specifically, I was actually freaked out because Spider-Man was genuinely giving like black suit energy the entire episode. He was going after Kraven without pulling a single punch. As a matter of fact, when Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man said, "I stopped pulling my punches," I envisioned him to move and act a lot like MTV's Spider-Man, because the way in which he fought, very acrobatic, very brutal, and almost with zero regard for anybody's well-being except for his own. That's how I would imagine Andrew Garfield letting loose after losing Gwen. I thought this episode handled it extremely well, and I thought this show displayed it really well. Again, they get a chance to display it in a way in which no other Spider-Man show would, right? They have the reins to be more adult. I mean, just look at some of these scenes they're doing for this fight. Kraven, for example, quite literally gets hung as Spider-Man is ready to choke him to death and snap his neck in order to kill him. That's how angry he is. Ultimately, what it takes is noticing some continuity errors with the dream that the twins presented to him relative to what is actually happening in real life. Like ESU still has their symbol on it instead of it falling to the ground and being broken. Harry's arm isn't actually broken or in a cast. Kraven hasn't actually come back to New York since the first encounter they had earlier in the season. Technically for Spider-Man, this is their third meeting, mind control included, second meeting for Kraven in the real world. This finally clues Spider-Man into the idea that the twins have been playing tricks on him and ultimately have been causing him to see things that were never happening. We get our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man back, but it's again, the idea that what you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're doing isn't actually representative of reality makes it so scary. It's extraordinarily dark, especially as the episode goes on, because this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this episode. For reference, MJ has also currently been kidnapped by these people, so that just makes it even more fun for Spidey. And when he goes to save MJ, unfortunately we get what is arguably one of the craziest scenes I've ever seen in a Spider-Man show, but one of this show's saddest scenes. Nikki is a character that you come to either really like or really hate throughout the course of this show. I actually liked Nikki. I thought she melded well with Peter, so I found it very enjoyable, especially their dynamic. But when we see that Nikki herself is very news-oriented, she's going to put herself in danger if it means getting a story. And since Peter is constantly using her for information as Spider-Man, he ultimately decided that he would take Nikki and use her to get information. Like always, right? Makes sense. But in doing so, he ultimately made a fatal mistake because Nikki followed Spider-Man, Nikki went after him, and she ended up on the same rooftop as Peter. Now, Peter is bloodlusted at this point. He's extraordinarily angry and upset at the twins. He wants to desperately hurt them, and he's not thinking in his right mind even without mind control. and ultimately, he makes a decision that is extraordinarily rash. He pushes what he believes to be the female twin off the building, and unfortunately for him, that's not one of the twins. That was Nikki, who was going after a scoop. And what we see next is genuinely horrifying. We literally have to see Nikki's beaten and broken body on the ground. Well, the twins just cackle because this is like a regular Tuesday for them. They're crazy, like actively crazy. And Nikki is shown to quite literally be brain dead. They believe that in the hospital, Nikki may never wake up again. She's, for all intents and purposes, there's the catchphrase, guys, dead. Gosh, that was in such poor taste. But for all intents and purposes, Nikki is brain dead. She has a very, very low chance of waking up, and it's all Spider-Man's fault. Had Peter been holding back like he should have, had Peter chosen to be in his right mind, even outside of just wanting to hurt the twins, he probably would not have put himself in a position to hurt Nikki like that. Obviously, not all of the blame is on Spider-Man. He did believe that he was catching the bad guys, but Peter feels all of that guilt. He feels every single ounce of it, and he decides that Spider-Man is no more after this. Again, it's really funny because this show came out before Spider-Man 2, and it was in between Spider-Man's 1 and 2, so they're stealing the Spider-Man giving up his suit plotline before Sam Raimi even got to it, which I find very funny. But Peter himself, he does actually successfully take out the twins this time, using a sedative and realizing their powers are only good when they're together. Only when they are together can they make somebody see an illusion. So ultimately, Peter separates them and sedates them, all in order to be able to take care of them. And well, take care of him he does, because they both end up blowing up in a fiery death. Spider-Man may have a no-kill rule, but much like Batman and Batman Begins, he doesn't have to save you either. And there was really no chance he was going to save the twins in this situation. I mean, he barely saved himself in time. And while he may have gotten the twins and he may have taken care of them, he lost a woman that he might not have loved, but he definitely cared for in Nikki. He also ended up losing his ability to be Spider-Man. The media has completely turned against him. The world has turned against him. Even Harry, who was starting to come around on the idea of liking Spider-Man, of that maybe Spider-Man's a good person, now has a reason to fully double down on Spider-Man being a bad guy, Spider-Man being evil. And even when Mary Jane sees this and tries to at least talk to Peter, he isn't having it. He doesn't want that relationship with MJ anymore, as though they were going to have. By the end of the show, they were getting close to Peter and MJ converging. He doesn't feel like he's in a good enough spot to do that anymore. And he doesn't want to be Spider-Man anymore. It's something that he has to give up in what I think is low-key one of the saddest but best bittersweet moments I've ever seen in a Spider-Man TV show. He fills his briefcase with bricks, puts the suit in it, and dumps it, while giving this really great monologue to end the show on, which again, Neil Patrick Harris just did wonderful, wonderful work as Spider-Man in this show.
Me that being a superhero is an impossible game to win, or that the ones closest to me would always suffer the most. Some who hold a grudge against me, and some who tried to give me so much, only to lose everything. I don't want to cause any more pain here. I can't live with that burden any longer. So it's time for me to say goodbye, Spider-Man.
Now, here's actually a little bit of behind the scenes for this show. The whole idea with Peter throwing out his suit, giving up being Spider-Man, it obviously wasn't supposed to be permanent. This wasn't supposed to be how the show ended. As a matter of fact, MTV Spider-Man was supposed to get a second season, and in that second season, Peter himself was supposed to move on to a costume that would have been more unique to the show itself, and wouldn't have actually been like Sam Raimi's. The entire idea with this ending was to distance themselves from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man as much as possible so they can go on making their own continuity without being pigeonholed into the ideal world that Sam Raimi had built. It's also great because having Spider-Man quit being Spider-Man twice, once in between the two movies and the second time during the movie, would have been really confusing and messy. So I think the idea was really great, but unfortunately due to poor ratings, MTV's Spider-Man never got renewed. So instead, we just ended up with this being the ending of the show. An extremely dark and sad ending, because in this universe, Peter never picked the mask up again. As a matter of fact, Peter potentially killed one of his love interests, left her in the hospital permanently, potentially, obviously, and gave up being Spider-Man afterwards. He put the suit in the lake and never picked the mask up again. That's the ending we're left with for this show, and it is extremely dark. Like, I know I definitely said this about Batman Beyond, and while I feel Batman Beyond is a little bit more warranted because it was specifically designed as a kid's show, we've never had a Spider-Man this real, nor this dark, in any form of media outside of movies, and even then, none of the movies went this far. The closest we ever got was Gwen dying. None of them went this far to showcase things like mind control, taking away your ability to do things, basically having to kill one of your own love interests intentionally. They never went that far. This show did, and I think that's part of what made it so good. And I would have loved a second season for this show, but if we had gotten a second season for this show, I don't think we get Spectacular Spider-Man. So, you know, you kind of trade one for the other, depending on what you would have preferred. Again, I really liked this show. I only had like the first, I think like 3 or 4 episodes on DVD as a kid. I can't find the DVD box anymore. I've moved so many times that like, I just think I've lost it at this point. But it's one of the shows that sticks out in my mind as like, I remember it, but it was never super big for me growing up, and it's probably for good reason that it wasn't. Either way, I really, really enjoyed this show, and I was so glad I finally came back to talking about it. As I was scrolling down my channel, I realized, I made a video talking about this show like over a year ago, and the footage has just been chilling on my computer for a while, and I may or may not have said that I would continue with a follow-up on Electro, so here we are, just a year late. So shout out to you guys who saw that episode and saw this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I truly, truly appreciate it. Okay, time to do the whole YouTuber thing. If you're still watching, leaving a like or a dislike will actually help out the channel a lot. If you do leave a dislike though, please give me a comment down below addressing why you gave a dislike, as constructive criticism helps me to be a better creator for all of you. If you want to subscribe, it's free. You can always unsub later. As well, if you want to go the extra mile and support me a little bit more, I do run a Patreon in which for $1 a month, you can see these videos early, completely unedited, so any changes I have to make for YouTube don't show up in that version. As well, like if you just want to support me, like thank you so much. And finally, I do have a $5 and above tier where I'll shout you out at the end of each and every one of these videos. And so it's about time that I got to shouting out my wonderful members in that tier. So shout out Demetrius Youngblood, shout out Metal Monk, shout out West Belladonna, shout out Oscar, shout out McGann, shout out Eastbert 13, gosh, I'm so bad at that, Gabriel Lafonte, Transgers1, Video Gamer 75, Golden Boy 420, Dakota Ross, and Donovan Gomez, and MC Bomb 27. You all are amazing. Hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day.